Indonesia is very well known for having a cuisine that is diverse. It is mainly because Indonesia is composed of approximately 6,000 populated islands of a total of 18,000 in the world's largest archipelago. To this present day, Indonesia is still really famous for its different spices. These different spices that were originally from Indonesia can be found almost anywhere around the world now. But little do people today know that these spices that could be found almost anywhere were so difficult and rare to find in the early 16th century. Because of these rare natural resources Indonesia has, like for say these spices, Indonesia has always been involved with trade. That's why it has many foreign influences. Influences from Indian food, Chinese food, and Dutch food can be found in many Indonesian dishes today. Before the 4th century, Indonesia still hasn't yet started to trade their spices along with India. And that is why Indonesia really didn't incorporate much of their spices into their dishes until the Indian influence. Like for example, this dish called the beef rendang. Beef rendang is a spicy meat dish. India's influence can be observed in Indonesia as early as the 4th century when they started to trade their spices and all. India has an influence in the Sumatran cuisine as well due to the use of curry in the dishes that include meat or fish. That's why beef rendang is now cooked with a curry base as shown in this video. As you can see in this map, India and Indonesia are practically neighbors. That's why during their trading time back then, it was really simple to do, especially through Indonesia's free trade. After the continuous trade of spices between India and Indonesia, many Indian spices like this ground pepper can be found in modern dishes in Indonesia today. Before the Chinese influence, Indonesia was only mainly involved with trade between India. Immigration to Indonesia from China started in the 7th century, so there is a large Chinese component integrated into the cuisine of the country. By the time the Chinese arrived, they engaged in business with the Malays and Javanese instead of the Portuguese. By the time the Dutch arrived in the early 17th century, major Chinese settlements and influences existed along the north coast of Java. Because of the influence Chinese had on Indonesian cuisine, dishes like nasi goreng, lumpia, and bakpia can trace their origin to Chinese influence. Chinese-inspired cuisines can also be found in various locations in Indonesia. For example, in Central Java, food there tends to be a lot more sweeter. While in West Java, food there tends to be a lot saltier. Overall, most dishes you can find in Indonesia today are based on Chinese influence in the past few centuries. Before the Dutch influence, in 1619, the VOC, known as the Netherlands United East Company, took indirect control over the archipelago of Indonesia until the 18th century. But the company's charter expired when the Dutch government took immediate control over Indonesia. Because of the rare natural resources in Indonesia, the Dutch were willing to take the risk and go to the Bandas Islands to find spices like nutmeg and cloves. They were willing to take the risk because just one of these nutmeg spices can afford to buy this grand house in England at that time. But when the Dutch arrived in Indonesia, they were being treated harshly. All the heavy tax burdens were given towards them, which made them face poverty, and overall, they were being exploited. But while the Dutch were in Indonesia, they brought goods like coffee, which became one of the largest exporters of the product until today.